Just take us through the map as it's looking at the moment. Russian advances, they've certainly slowed in the last couple of weeks, but you can see that pattern, can't you, of them trying to join up the areas that they do control?
Yeah, I think we're seeing from your reports, I mean, fighting continues in the country, but from a strategic perspective, the Russian forces around Kiev seem to be more digging in at the moment. They seem to be more consolidating, probably resupplying, etc. But we're seeing around the Donbass region out to the east there and Mariupol some intensely fierce fighting. And I think that's going to continue for the time being. I think strategically, though, as well, the initial deployment of 150,000 Russian troops appears to have stalled now. And there's either a stalled or an operational pause. And when things like that happen, there are windows of opportunity for negotiation to happen, because negotiations will only happen if both sides see some benefit in talking rather than continue to prosecute the war. So there's a faint glimmer of hope, maybe, of some progress there.
So that's the hope from the talks. But on the ground, you know, it appears that President Putin is essentially just trying to split up Ukraine to try to sort of shave off this particular bit.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation about this and what are the starting point for negotiation, and we can only speculate on that. I think Kiev remains a strategic priority for Putin, but I think given the outstanding Ukrainian resistance in Mariupol, that's probably a step too far in the near term. Certainly Russia has invested a lot of its military in the Donbass region for many years, and therefore focusing on that to secure that. And also this land bridge from Crimea to Russia, Mariupol stands in the way. So I think we can expect to see an intensification of activity there. And that creates a line on a map which might form Putin's start point for negotiation. I'd be very surprised if Zelensky agrees with that line.
And, you know, we're talking about lines on maps, but these are people's homes, these are people's communities and people's lives. And as we saw at Alex's report, you know, what's happening on the ground is still dreadful.
Yeah, and I think one thing that sometimes gets forgotten when we're talking about strategic lines on maps is Mariupol has been absolutely flattened, as have many other towns and cities in Ukraine. And the people have had their lives devastated. It's cost them their homes, their livelihoods, their families, their children. It's very difficult to see how they will accept a random line on a map and become subjugated to Russia, which creates a real problem. I mean, there are precedents for this in Finland in the sort of 1940s, when the former Soviet Union attacked, and eventually Finland ceded about 9% of its territory in order to secure its freedom. But it's very difficult to see how that would work in this situation. I think the real challenge, though, from my perspective and from the West perspective, is whatever the negotiation holds, how does Zelensky secure security for Ukraine? Twice in the last 8 years, he's been invaded by Russia. Twice that Putin has lied to him about that. And although the Russian forces haven't performed particularly well on this invasion, and Ukraine has done an outstanding job, Russia will learn. They'll learn from this experience, and in another 8 years, they'll be much better equipped for fighting. So how does Zelensky secure his country? One of the ways of doing that being talked about is neutrality. The trouble is that sounds like neutering. It sounds like being helpless and therefore creating a vulnerable country, which is not something that I think Zelensky would be happy with. And it would rely on Putin's word. It would rely on trusting his word, which is very hard to see. I think we can surmise that Zelensky is carrying a huge weight of responsibility of history on his shoulders, whilst there's also NATO and the EU countries. And I think from a strategic perspective, Zelensky and Ukraine find themselves at the front line of a global battle between democracy and autocracy. And those two tectonic plates, where they join, it's very hard to see there's not going to be friction.
Well, indeed, an earthquake indeed. Sean Bell, thanks very much.